Welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kinnahan, and today we're going to be previewing Washington's Week 2 Thursday Night Football matchup against the Green Bay Packers. It's going to be a fun one coming out on Thursday night. Washington's entering this game 1-0. The Packers also 1-0 after a win against the Detroit Lions in Week 1 last Sunday. Both of these squads, playoff caliber teams. It's going to be a very fun matchup. I'm excited to dive into it, so let's just get right into it. We'll start with my initial thoughts. Washington, Green Bay at Lambeau Field, Thursday Night Football, the first one on Amazon Prime of the season. It's a big-time matchup. It's the first of 6 or 7, I think, primetime games that Washington has this season. If you count Christmas, I believe it's probably 6 or 7, so something like that. But it's a lot. So it's the first of many. Washington coming into a short week. They are now the first team, along with the Packers, to have a considered short week of the season after playing on Sunday. Both these squads played on Sunday, and then which Packers actually played a little bit later. So they played at 4:25, or I guess 3:25, local time when they played. But now they are playing on Thursday, so only 3 days of rest before they play again. Same with the Commanders, who their game wrapped up a little bit earlier, so they have a couple hours extra, you could say, of rest. But they are traveling to Lambeau Field here on Thursday night. Washington, like I mentioned, enters this game 1-0. It was a very solid win against the New York Giants team last time around, where not everything was great for the Commanders, but they showed they were the better team. They were the more talented team coming into this matchup, and they showed that they won this game. I mean, there was probably only a little bit of stress for Commanders fans for around 5 or so minutes in that third quarter, but beyond that, it was a pretty stress-free opener for Washington Commanders fans, I would say. So the Commanders are coming into now their first, you could say, a real matchup, going up against a team that was in the playoffs last year, a team that is, favorites to make it to the playoffs again this year, and a team that's coming into this game, I believe, 3.5 or 4.5 point favorites, and that is the Green Bay Packers, a team that is always been successful. One of the best regular season coaches is Matt LaFleur. He always gets his Packers double-digit wins. I believe his first 3 years, they had 12 or 13 wins each of those years when he was the head coach. So this is a team that has a lot of success in the regular season, and they're going to be tasked with a Washington team that is coming off of a very, very great year last year, making it to the NFC Championship game, in the process beating the Lions and beating the Bucs along the way. And now they're going to play another NFC North team in the Green Bay Packers, where this Commanders team, young quarterback Jaden Daniels, going up against this Packers defense with Jeff Hafley for the first time. That's going to be a lot of fun, a great matchup to watch. There's a lot of stuff to dive into here, and it's going to be two high-powered teams, very talented teams, very good regular season teams going at it against each other on Thursday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's dive into the first matchup, and that is the Commanders offense going up against this Packers defense with Jeff Hafley and company. Hafley coming over, of course, after being the Boston College. Well, he was the head coach there, I believe, or defensive coordinator for quite some time. So this is his third year, I want to say, as the defensive coordinator for the Packers. Maybe it's the second year. I want to say it's the third year. But the big story on this Packers defensive line, of course, is the addition of Micah Parsons. Parsons was only had about a week, maybe it was a little bit less than a week, to prepare for the Green Bay Packers' first game against the Detroit Lions. Maybe it was a little bit more than a week, but to prepare for that first matchup against the Detroit Lions. He did not play, a ton. He had that one sack on Jared Goff, his first sack as a Green Bay Packer. I would expect him to be more comfortable in that system this time around, just of course with the more experience that he has. And I overall just think, he's going to be a pretty big factor in this one. It's a plus getting Parsons out of the division because you don't have to play him twice a year, but you still got to play him here on Thursday night against this Packers team. This Packers team has a great pass rush, along with Micah Parsons. Rashawn Gary's a double-digit sack guy. You've got, on the inside, Devontae Wyatt. And you've also got some young, very talented players in the back end of that depth chart, including Lucas Van Ness and Baron Sorrell, who, Sorrell may or may not be activated on the game day, but, just some younger players on the back end. And also Carl Brooks and Nazir Stackhouse as well, drafted pretty recently, but for both of those guys. So this front four has a lot of talent. They're very athletic. That was something that Matt LaFleur and that the previous defensive coordinator as well in Green Bay wanted. They loved athletic players on the defensive side of the ball and athletic defensive linemen more specifically. That's where they got the additions of Lucas Van Ness, who was, I believe, a 99th percentile athlete when he measured in at the Senior Bowl or at the Combine, whenever that was. His relative athletic score was, I think, 99 or 100th percentile. Then you also have Devontae Wyatt, who's also a great run stopper on the interior out of Georgia, Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, two linebackers that are very athletic players. Cooper, of course, you could say maybe is the better of the two, but still two very capable linebackers of creating turnovers, which is going to be huge in this game. I'll talk about it now. I'll talk about it a little bit. Turnovers are going to be huge. And then in that secondary, Xavier McKinney, Nate Hobbs, who they just brought in. I know he was questionable. I don't remember if he played or not in that first game. But you've also got Javon Bullard as well. Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon. There's definitely a weakness in that secondary, especially on the outside corner positions, I would say, where that Washington can attack. But there's still some dudes in that secondary like McKinney, like Hobbs, that are there to make plays and that are some of the best at their positions in the league. So there's a lot to look forward to going up against this defense. For Washington's offense, just talking about, some stats that I was looking at last week or over the last couple of days. Overall, 52% success rate on plays, which was, up there, top quartile in terms of statistics. Washington was the most efficient rushing team on offense by a good margin, 58% success rate on rushing plays, gaining 0.25 EPA per play. And they picked up a first down 35% of the time they ran the ball. So very successful in the ground, and especially on the early downs, which is kind of one of their keys, right? Last year for Washington, running the ball was there to help set up the pass for the Commanders. And now you have Jaden, of course, which can help do it for you. You don't really know how to call a designed run when you have Jaden because he can always run at any point. But having guys like Bill Krosky-Merritt, who had a very impressive debut last week, Austin Eckler, maybe you could say, didn't really look, it wasn't his best performance, but, he's still a dude out there in that running back room. And Jeremy McNichols as well had a couple of good carries in that fourth quarter. So early downs for Washington was really where they had success running the football. 58% success rate rushing the ball on early downs. That's huge. That is, I mean, that means like success rate. If you haven't heard before, basically, are you getting enough yards to convert the first down? So, for example, on average, you need to pick up 3 or 4 yards on every down to get a first down, right? Well, 58% of the time when they were running the football, they were getting at least 4 yards, which is huge. It is huge. Jaden running the ball was great, and Krosky-Merritt, of course, running the ball was also great. Jaden led the team in rushing last week. I would probably expect that to be the case again this week, but Bill Krosky-Merritt really showed that the dude that he is. And I know he's been playing really well throughout the preseason. I am in at training camp. The coaches love him. The 7th-round pick out of Arizona, if you haven't heard his name by now, you're probably living under a rock. But he's been doing incredible for the Commanders, and he's definitely going to be playing a major factor in this game against the Green Bay Packers in the run. In terms of the passing game for Washington, pretty much everyone is healthy. I know there was a little bit of talk about Jaden and right wrist injury. He popped up on the injury report as a full participant, but he was listed with a right wrist injury. He is all good to go, says Dan Quinn. I think it was more of a precautionary thing than anything. He was never limited at any point throughout the week. He was full practice, really good to go. I know there's a lot of the veterans, which we'll talk to in a second. A lot of veterans on that injury report that were resting throughout this week. But for Jaden, he is all good to go for Thursday's matchup. In terms of the passing attack and the receivers, this is where I think Washington is going to have a major advantage against the Green Bay Packers. Terry McLaurin, yes, it wasn't, a big game last week, only 2 catches for whatever it was, 20 something yards, probably something like that for Terry. But you got to think about how close he was to having a big game. You had the deep shot, the Terry along the left sideline that Jaden just put out a little bit too far. You had there was another chance where that was almost a catch and they ruled it back and it was incomplete. So he was a couple plays away from having a really big game, probably over 70 or 80 yards, including that touchdown if he caught that deep pass from Jaden because he was wide open. A great route from Terry to get himself open. The quarterback overcommit on a little bit of a like kind of a hezzy in Terry's route. He tried to cut inside just a little bit, and the cornerback overcommitted. He got his hips flipped away from Terry, and it's just as Tyler Kolek once said, it's just barbecue chicken from there. So Terry was open on that play, but wasn't able to connect. I am not worried about his performance at all from last week. I think he can be in for another really big week this week here on this Thursday night game. But even without Terry, Debo last week was very impressive in his Washington debut. I thought he not only was great in the receiving game, which is probably what, when you think of Debo's performances last week, that's where you look at his receiving game and that rushing touchdown, but he was a great blocker, which was one of the reasons why Adam Peters, moved away from Jahan Dotson in that first offseason and during that first preseason this time last year, I guess a little bit, probably about 13 months ago now when that happened. But that's why he moved away from a guy like Jahan Dotson because he wasn't willing to block and help open up the run or screen game, really. Well, Debo put out a clinic blocking out there, and so did John Bates as well. I just want to talk about John Bates for a second. I know we're off track here, but John Bates had an amazing game blocking last week, and just having the luxury that we have of having a guy like Bates just being such a dude in the blocking game. I could create, full 2-3 minute highlight reels of Bates just blocking his butt off from last Sunday. And he's going to be a huge factor going up against some of these edge rushers, helping go up against maybe a rushing Edgerrin Cooper who, rushes the passer, or Quay Walker when Hafley calls on these blitzes. Bates was huge picking up the blitz last week, and he even had a few good reps against some of those bigger, or not bigger edge rushers, but some of those like edge rusher, real true pass rushers like Abdul Carter and like Brian Burns. He helped out a lot as well. So he could be a huge factor, especially when you're going up against two very good pass rushers like Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary. Similar to last week, you're going to need some running backs and some tight ends out there to kind of help some of the younger offensive linemen like Josh Connolly and it was really that right side that kind of struggled for Washington last week. Connolly and Allegretti, mainly on the outside though. With Connolly, if you have a running back that can help, maybe give a little bit of a chip to an edge rusher, just slow him down a little bit. Jaden is just so quick in the pocket with his processing, with his ability to create. Just sometimes a little bit of a chip is it's good enough for Jaden to create a huge play. So having a guy like John Bates you can even put him one-on-one with some of these linebackers or blitzing corners, and you can trust him on the outside as a blocker. That's huge. That's huge in what Cliff wants to do, especially with the screening game as well. You get Bates out, kicking out, to the outside and helping, take out a corner or a safety or a linebacker. Bates is just such a huge piece in this offense. And one of the first things that I believe Adam Peters did was re-signing John Bates. Once, I believe that was last offseason. Maybe it was the season before that. But I remember Bates got an extension pretty recently. So I think that was one of the first things Peters did was re-sign John Bates. So just a huge piece. Him and Debo as well. Debo's a willing blocker. He's kind of a bigger receiver, bulkier receiver. So he can put some weight on some of these smaller quarterbacks. But this passing game, yeah, like I mentioned, Terry, I think it's really any one of these wide receivers can all be in for a pretty big game, just like the one that Debo had last week. It could be Debo again going up against, I think it'll be a little bit more difficult going up against a really good, slot corner and in a guy like you got Bullard there, and you've got Hobbs as well who plays both inside and outside. So I think it might be a little bit harder for a guy like Debo to have a big game. I think it would probably have to be, a Terry or even a Noah Brown that picks up 5, 6, or 7 catches throughout this game. But still, a pretty big opportunity for this passing attack going up against this Packers passing game. Like I mentioned with the running game, Washington's run attack on Sunday was one of the best overall. I would say. Well, it was the most efficient rushing attack or rushing offense last week, but it's going to be tough to going up against this front seven, like I mentioned, because the Packers went up against the Lions last week, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were just shut down completely. So that is pretty much that on the offense, though. I still think this is a pretty good matchup overall for Washington's offense going up against this Packers defense, as long as the offensive line holds up like it did last week, and they just limit the penalties because the penalties were huge for Washington, kind of setting them back. And even though the game felt like Washington was beating the Giants by 25 or 30 points, they only won by 15. And a big part of that was the penalties just setting them back in drives and just ruining drives overall. So if Washington can limit that, especially on the offensive line, I know Tunsil had one that was declined. Connolly had a penalty, and Biotish, I think, as well. As long as they can limit the penalties, they'll be all good. All right, let's switch sides of the ball now to the defensive side for the Commanders. Going up against Jordan Love and the Packers offense. Love's entering his third season, third season, I think, as a starter, I want to say now. Yeah, third season as a starter for the Green Bay Packers. Josh Jacobs will be in the backfield, mainly being the main back. Not really going to see a lot of Emmanuel Wilson or Chris Brooks. It's mainly just Josh Jacobs back there, but Jacobs still has the juice. He's still got it. So he might be getting on the older side, second contract for a running back, all of that, but he's still got it, and he's definitely still a big factor in this game for the Green Bay Packers, as he can have a lot of success behind a pretty good rushing attack that the Packers have. As far as their receivers go, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Romeo Dobbs, and friends, really. Christian Watson still recovering from that torn ACL. Reed, Golden, and Dobbs will be the main three for the Packers. This Commander secondary loves to play a ton of man coverage. They played a lot against the New York Giants, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 1 throughout that game. That will probably be the case again going up against these guys. The speed is what really stands out to me with these receivers. Jaden Reed, Golden, and Dobbs, they all got speed, especially Golden and Reed. So making sure that maybe you go more open field coverages. You make sure you have 2 high over the top. Maybe we see some more of cover 2/4. Maybe we see some cover 6 in there as well, just because of the downfield threats that those guys bring, which helps open stuff up for Josh Jacobs, right, in the running game, or Tucker Kraft or Luke Musgrave at tight end. So there's a lot of ways for this Green Bay offense to beat a defense, just because of the speed that they can bring over the top versus the really one-headed monster they have in the backfield. I know there's a lot of two-headed monsters now in the backfield for a lot of teams, but Josh Jacobs really still got it. You can still give him 12 plus carries a game and he'll be all good. So there's a lot of ways for this Packers offense to win, but I still really like this Commanders defense. I think if they can get some pressure on Jordan Love and force the running game to get going, that's going to be big for this Washington team. I think this Washington defense showed that they are much improved in the running game than they were last season. I think there's still some things to work on, but overall, limiting Josh Jacobs, I think, will be priority number 1. I'm not as scared about this passing attack as I am of Josh Jacobs right now, but the passing attack can still beat this Washington defense, if you guys know what I'm saying. So just making sure at the same time you're covering downfield and you're covering the run. I know it's kind of hard to do both, but that's what Joe Witt and company are tasked with this offense. But for the Commanders, secondary going up against these wide receivers, Marshawn Lattimore, Trey Amos. Amos had a pretty solid debut, I would say. Lattimore, I thought, played great and really showed why, when he's healthy, he's really good to go. Still one of the better cornerbacks in this league. And so He's going to be forced to run, though. I know he's had that kind of chronic hamstring injury over the course of his career, but he's going to be forced to run a lot in this game just because if they do end up playing a lot of man coverage against this Packers offense, you're going to see a lot of crossers from Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, and Tucker Kraft is going to be in there as well. You're going to see that downfield threat that Matthew Golden brings. Make sure you don't want to be beat over the top. So that's going to be key for a guy like Quan Martin to kind of play over the top and make sure that, Golden stays in front of him. I think making tackles against a lot of these, shiftier wide receivers like Reed and like Golden are going to be crucial as well. And I guess you could say this is always the case, but the penalties, if this team does play man coverage, which I expect them to play a good amount, it's going to be tough to defend some of these downfield threats without getting a pass interference call. Golden and Reed and Dobbs, they're all going to be attacking downfield, so you got to make sure you play physical, but you don't play too physical and get called for a DPI or something like that, because that is a huge 40-yard gain, 40-yard gain for this Packers offense with just not even having to try to catch the ball or not even getting close to catching a football. So Lattimore, Amos, they've got to stay disciplined on those deep shots. Make sure they don't pick up a DPI, because that could really just be a huge momentum shifter and just give the Packers some free yardage, because the penalties were a little bit of a problem on Sunday. This time around, though, the Packers are going to take some deep shots in this game, so just got to make sure to stay disciplined is really the main thing here. But yeah, that was pretty much that on the defensive side of the ball. So now that we got both sides done, one more thing before we get to the score prediction here. One more thing: Tressway questionable with back injury. I want to say it was he got hit pretty hard on the tipped. It was a tipped punt. It wasn't blocked, but I believe it was tipped. He got kind of sent into the air and fell pretty hard. So he is questionable for the game against the Packers on Thursday. Also, I believe there's one other guy that is questionable as well for Washington. That is Dietrich Wise. He was limited on Wednesday, which was noticeable. While for the Packers, it looks like Brenton Cox and Bo Milton are both out. Hobbs is questionable. Aaron Banks is questionable. Zach Tom is questionable. Zach Tom has not participated all week long. I probably wouldn't expect him. That'd probably be a pretty big loss for the Green Bay Packers over at right tackle. So once more, a kind of a banged up offensive line for this Packers team, similar to the Giants last week. Washington could take advantage of that. But like I was saying with the Tressway stuff originally, Washington signed Mitch Wishnowsky, I believe that's how you say it, to the practice squad, former 49ers punter, along with, I believe, a couple of other teams. So he could be elevated for Washington if necessary, and Tressway is not able to go. Here's my score prediction, though. We've got a great Thursday night primetime matchup, Packers and Commanders. I am going to go 28-24 Commanders in this one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be a pretty close game as well. I expect a lot of great plays from both sides of the ball, a lot of highlight plays throughout. I think this is going to be a fun matchup for both sides, but I think Washington ends up picking up the victory here as well. It's going to be a one-score game. Washington wins again. I know this could potentially be I think this is going to be a one-score game. It's just what side of the coin will it fall? It's going to be the question. Washington won a lot of one-score games last week. Is it time? Are they going to regress to the mean this year? We'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be a very fun matchup to watch between the two. That'll wrap things up, though, for today's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. The next episode will be out on Friday morning, recapping the game, a great one between the Commanders and the Packers. It's going to be really fun. I'm going to have a lot of fun watching it on Thursday night on Amazon Prime, the first one of the season. But that'll do it for me. You've been listening to this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I've been your host, Mason Kinnahan. See you guys in the next one. Peace.